Imagine if you only went to the gym when you were inspired. Imagine if you only had difficult conversations with your partner when you were inspired. Imagine if you only went to work when you were inspired. You might not go that often, and you might end up regretting that towards the end of your journey. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. Episode number 60, Is Good Enough Ever Enough? We talked about the difference between realistic versus idealistic. Today, for episode number 61, the most important thing I have learned about inspiration as a podcaster. If you're watching this on YouTube, I am wearing my stringer/tank top because I just got back from the gym. Then I had a coaching call, and here we are. If you're listening, that was useless information, and I apologize for wasting your time. So, the most important thing I've learned about inspiration as a podcaster. Why are we doing this episode? Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around this topic and around podcasting in general. I had somebody I was working with one time, and I was working with them and they were missing episodes, and I kept saying, hey, I know you really want this to grow, and I know you want this podcast to lead to a lot of opportunity and a lot of things that you're interested in. And these things are important to you. I know you want to coach more people. I know you really believe in the impact that you desire to have. We need to get our stuff together. We need to stop missing episodes. And when this person was with me, they were fairly consistent. This person ended up leaving, and years later, I checked in, probably 2 years later. And at that point, this person had missed a ton of episodes, and they're all over the place. They take a week off, they take a month off, they do 4 episodes, they do 1 episode. They're just kind of all over the place. And I sent an audio, and we have this type of relationship, this person and I. They're very open to feedback. I said, hey, how's everything been going? How's the podcast going? How's the business going? How's everything going? And they said, well, I've really been struggling because I haven't been inspired to post episodes, and I really need to be inspired in order to get in front of the microphone. And there was a back and forth, and I ended up giving them feedback, and I said, you can take this or you can leave it. It's totally up to you. My fear is that if you wait for inspiration, you're going to be waiting for a long time. And if you're waiting for inspiration, you most likely will not succeed. Just because if you're not inspired every week, you're not going to be producing content every week. Imagine if you only went to the gym when you were inspired. Imagine if you only had difficult conversations with your partner when you were inspired. Imagine if you only went to work when you were inspired. You might not go that often, and you might end up regretting that towards the end of your journey. The most important thing I've learned about inspiration as a podcaster is you have to create it. You cannot rely upon it. Alan and I, for those who may be new, Alan's my business partner and the co-host of our other podcast, Next Level University. There are days where I probably wouldn't show up if it wasn't for him. Now we're at the stage where I would. I mean, I do this every week, so I would. But I'm not inspired to do an episode every day. I'm inspired to impact. I'm inspired to get better as a podcaster, but I'm not always inspired to express myself. I'm not always inspired to show up. Some days I don't want to do it. I believe one of the lies we've been told is if you love something, you never work a day in your life. I don't believe that because there's a lot of things that come with doing the thing that you love that you might not. I love going to the gym. I really do. I don't enjoy doing mobility. I don't enjoy drinking however many glasses of water I drink every day, or I don't necessarily enjoy tracking my calories or my macros. I don't really enjoy that. To really spend a lot of time doing something you love, I believe requires spending a lot of time doing the stuff that you don't, but you must to supplement what you do. Is that even a real sentence? I don't know. I think so. I think it all makes sense if I was to slow it down and say it again. But that really is the thought I have. Inspiration is great. And when it strikes, awesome. That's great. When it strikes, that's amazing. I find that inspiration, so I rap. I do some songwriting and rapping on the side. One of the reasons I believe that I haven't been nearly as consistent as I used to is because I haven't been inspired as much. Also, my schedule is fairly hectic, all things considered, with everything we have going on, and it just wasn't the most important priority. But I'm sure, well, let's do this. I just watched a documentary about Louis Capaldi. If you don't know who he is, he had a song called Someone You Loved, was one of his bigger songs. It's been streamed over 1 billion times. He has sold 1 million+ concert tickets, a very, very successful artist. And in this documentary on Netflix, it showed him trying to write his second album. And he went to the studio and he just put himself in the studio for X amount of hours a day to write. It's not that he was always inspired. He just knew he had to get it done, and he knew sometimes you have to start to get inspired. You have to physically start before inspiration comes. I'm sure that's one of the reasons I haven't been writing as much, is because I don't schedule it. If it's not scheduled, I'm not going to sit down and find inspiration. It's proactive versus reactive. Proactive inspiration is you sitting down and understanding why you wanted to do this in the first place and how you feel after. If you want to be inspired to do something, talk to yourself about how you're going to feel after you do it. I think that's one really, really great way to do it. I was never inspired to do podcast interviews because I was always terrified of asking the wrong question or looking stupid or whatever it is. But I always enjoyed the fact that I did them, and I was always grateful after. So that's a really important perspective for me, at least, to have when it comes to inspiration. And I would argue one of the reasons I haven't been rapping as much is probably because I've been waiting for inspiration. And again, it hasn't been as much of a priority, where if it's scheduled in, I'm going to show up and I'm going to see what happens. And oftentimes I would find inspiration. I would sit down and say, okay, I have 3 hours to write a song. I would start listening to different beats, and a beat would hit me and I would say, this is the one. And lyrics would just kind of start coming to me. It just made sense. I became inspired.
Hey Kevin, Kim here. Just wanted to send you a video to say thank you so much for your help on creating the Peaceful Productivity Podcast. You know, I couldn't have done it without you. I knew you'd be lots of great help with the technical aspects of getting the podcast going, but you went well above and beyond that. You helped me with the strategy and you gave me all kinds of really great support. You know, I think the key to success in business is a great attitude, and you have that in spades. You really walk the walk. So thanks again. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
I think sometimes you have to be in the room, in the arena, in the studio, in front of the microphone, on the field, whatever, right? Inside the journal, or on the typewriter, on the laptop, whatever it is you're doing. I don't know if most people are using typewriters anymore, to actually find that inspiration. That is what I have learned. You're probably not always going to want to do it. Whatever it is, you're not going to want to do a podcast episode every time, probably. If you do, awesome. Maybe I've just gotten to the point now where we've done so many that it's a heavy weight. There's a very, very heavy weight. Would I want to do anything else? No, absolutely not. I am blessed. This was my dream. I've wanted to do this for a long time. So I'm not taking that for granted. I'm just saying there are days where I don't want to do it. There are days where I'm afraid I don't know what to say. There are days where I am not inspired to podcast. There are days I don't want to post on social media. There are days I am not inspired to go on other people's shows. But I'll tell you, the second I get in the green room and I start singing my little song that I sing before I go on and just getting the energy, I'm inspired when I see someone. I'm inspired when I get to the end of the interview, and I literally say this. I'll say this in the studio, and I'll say it to my wife. I get to meet some of the coolest people, some of the kindest people, some of the most heart-driven people, some of the most unique people. I get to meet some really cool people. That inspires me. That inspires me. So it's almost like if you want inspiration, you have to do the things necessary to create it. If you want messages from your listeners, and you want them to reach out and say, wow, this episode really changed my life, or this episode did whatever, you got to do all the episodes in between that you're not necessarily inspired to do. That is what I would say. That is what I have learned about inspiration. Maybe I'm different. Maybe I have more fear, uncertainty, or insecurity. I don't know. But I know Alan has moments like that where we're sitting there and we're on the 4th episode of the day and we have 3 to go, and we look at each other and just start laughing and say, I don't want to do these next 3. It's a lot. I want to go hang out. I want to go lay down. I want to watch Netflix. I want to do whatever. I want to watch UFC. I'm not always inspired. And if you are, awesome. That's great. I would say you're probably more the exception than the rule. If you're not always inspired, this is what I want you to understand. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're not doing the right thing. It doesn't mean you can't succeed. It doesn't mean you can't get good at what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you're not on the right path. Maybe it just means that your expectations of the journey are a little bit different than the actual journey. Totally okay. As somebody who has done 2,000 plus episodes, I don't know. I don't always want to do them. The majority of the time I do. And every time, and I can say this at least about our show, every single episode we've ever recorded, I've been grateful for. I've been grateful after I did it. I've had some not so good experiences on other podcasts, but I'd say 99% of them, it's the same thing. I might not be inspired to do them, but I am so inspired and so grateful after I did them. Sometimes you have to get momentum before inspiration is created. That is my thought around inspiration. I also am very blessed because I have a business partner and there's more necessity and we have a team and all that. That's a piece of it too. The amount of necessity you have is also going to dictate how often you have to show up, even if it's through resistance. If you promised your audience, your community, the family, that you're going to show up every single week and you build your brand on that, inspiration isn't going to matter as much in terms of showing up. Now, content creation is completely different. Do I create better content when I'm inspired? I would say yes, definitely. But if I only created content when I was inspired, there wouldn't be nearly as much of it. So that is a juggling act as well, especially if you're creative. I'm very creative. Alan is the scientist in our relationship. I'm more the artist. So if you are the artist, inspiration is important when it comes to creating content, maybe more so than actually delivering it. But that's another thing where you're not always going to be inspired to create content. So you have to come up with your own system. What is your system? For me, I try to go through life, and this is going to sound like way too serious, most likely. I try to go through life always finding the opportunity to take lessons that I can bring back to the podcast. So what did I learn on my trip to Vermont this weekend or last week with Taryn? The importance of contrast, the importance of perspective. Going to a place every single year allows you to reveal how much progress you've made since the last year, right? So that's kind of how I go through my everyday life, is I'm trying to think of content that's going to really impact on the podcast. But again, we do an episode every day, so you don't have to be that level of obsessed with it. It's my full-time job and my business and my career and my livelihood, so you might not have to take it as seriously as I do. But that's just my process, and that's worked really, really well. The last thing I would say before we get out of here, this is turning into an inspirational speech at this point. Schedule out the days that you're going to record and don't ever change them. Every Monday from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. Eastern time, Alan and I meet and we record episodes. And that I can count on one hand the number of times that hasn't happened. I'm going to Belgium in 2 weeks, and I'm going to be away for 10 days. So I'm going to be away for 2 Mondays. One Monday, I'm actually going to podcast from Belgium, which is going to be a whole thing because I think they're 6 hours ahead. So that's going to be a whole thing. The other Monday, we're going to have to double up. We're going to miss that Monday recording. So we're going to have to do a ton of episodes the week before. So that's a very, very heavy thing to do. We'll probably end up recording 14 episodes in one day, but we're going to have to do that regardless of how inspired we are, because it's not going to be possible when I'm away. So having a schedule that cannot get changed, depending on what your schedule is something that is very, very, very helpful for this. My podcast growth family, podcast growth nation, if you are struggling with inspiration and you can't figure out how to sit down and just bust out an episode, you can't figure out the why, you've forgotten why you started this in the first place, you've lost touch with the purpose, feel free to book a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. Again, our other podcast is about mindset. It's about peak performance. It's about relationships. It's about productivity. It's about success. So on this, I know I talk predominantly about podcasting, as it is a podcast about podcasts. But if it's, I don't know how to get as many episodes done as I need to, I can help you with that. I don't know how to communicate how important my podcast is to my partner. I can help you with that for sure. I don't know how to set my environment up for success. I can help you with that as well. So anything that you feel you need help with, again, I don't know everything, but there's a chance I might be able to add a pinch of value. So wherever you are in the podcast journey, I would love to add value if I can. Click the link in the show notes for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session, as always. Next week, for episode number 62, 2 things you need to know about Facebook groups. I'm very excited for that one. Yeah, 2 things you need to know about Facebook groups. I always advise clients to have their own Facebook group for many reasons. And the other one is I see a lot of people posting in other people's Facebook groups. We're going to chat about that next week. As always, I appreciate you all. I love you all very much. I'm grateful for each and every one of you. If you listen to the show, reach out to me on Instagram. Or if you watch it on YouTube, reach out to me on Instagram. I want to know who you are. I want to know about your podcast. I want to be able to listen to it and check it out. I want to be able to see you post about it on social media so I can comment on it. Please, my handle is @NeverQuitKid on Instagram. I would love it. I will send you an audio back. I'll send you a video back if you follow me. I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. So yeah, @NeverQuitKid on Instagram. I would love to connect. Until next week, I appreciate y'all. I love you all. Before I start rambling, we are going to get out of here, and we will talk to you all next week.